Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
About time for anyone telling you off for all your deeds. No sign the roaring thunder stopped and cold to read. No time. I get mine.
It's that time of the night on Late Night Sports Radio. Welcome to the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour. I am your esteemed host, Jim Sarantias of the FantasyGreek.com, and I am joined by our producer from 87sportsfans.com, not to be outdone, one of the best in the business, Keith Grieve. Keith, how are you tonight?
I'm excited to be able to talk since I haven't done a show, my own show, in like 3 weeks. So it's like it's almost like I'm out of place talking on the air. But
well, we'll try and squeeze you in at some point this evening in our show, but it'll likely be in the back half of the show, Keith, because tonight we've got a special guest, and it's Dan Shanka from Our Lads NFL Scouting Services.com, or I'm sorry, ourlads.com NFL Scouting Services, who will be talking about the NFL draft and NFL draft picks in this first half of the show, and then in the second half we've got some just regularly sort of scheduled news items to talk about, including the recent announcement of the suspension of Cowboys defensive end Greg Hardy, who has been suspended for the first 10 games of the season. We've got Ben Franklin from the FantasyGreek.com who'll come on to talk to us a little bit about what happened there and I guess his reaction to the same. But in any case, why don't we get the show started? We're starting at a special time tonight, 9:30 Central Time, 10:30 Eastern Time. And before we get going, just a reminder to everybody out there, if you have a question or some comments, feel free to give us a call at 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. Or if you're shy, tweet The Greek on Twitter at #AskTFG. That's #AskTFG. And remember, there's no such thing as a stupid question, especially these days given the NFL draft that's just days away. So now I want to welcome our guest, Dan Shanka. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hello, Jim. Yeah, it's there are no stupid questions, just stupid people that ask questions, right? I remember, I think they used to say that in school when I was in elementary school or something, and so I think that some people are hesitant to ask questions, but hey, ask away, I guess.
Well, you know what? Every once in a while, I guess I've been known to ask a dumb question that everybody actually looks at me and says, "Hey, I'm glad you asked that because I wanted to." But I'm always the butt of the jokes, So look, as usual, we're lucky to have you, and thanks again for being on the show. I know you've been on the radio all day today, so we very much appreciate it. But you're the man. This is your expertise. You've been an NFL draft scout for, I believe, covering 4 decades, which is pretty darn impressive. And we had you on, I want to say about 2 months ago, and now we're getting you on with just about 7 days to go until the draft. And we've got a bunch of questions because some things have changed since the last time you were on. So I suppose to get started, let's just start at the beginning of the draft. Is it settled that Jameis Winston is the number 1 overall pick, or could there be a surprise and the Bucs go a different direction, especially since there's been some news that there's concern of Bucs ownership as to what the pick could mean in terms of their perception?
Well, I tell you, I don't know if it's a done deal. And I know Jason Light really well, and I haven't talked to Jason about this because he wouldn't tell me anyway what's going on. But I tell you, I think they're holding their cards close to the vest and leaving all their options open because, hey, who knows? They may be behind the scenes trying to get the Phillip Rivers deal done. You know what I mean? They may, because I tell you what, Lovie Smith would rather have a veteran quarterback that's clean as a whistle, like Phillip Rivers, for instance, and then Jameis having his I mean, I think most of the stuff is in the past. I mean, but you never know. I mean, some people say a leopard doesn't change his spots, and maybe he'll do something stupid down the road. Or I think that's the thing that they're afraid of. But you bring in a guy like Phillip Rivers, and I mean, and he's going to help lead your team in the right direction, and that's the same thoughts that Tennessee have if they can do a deal. And then, of course, Tedesco out to San Diego said, well, hey, he's going to be here for the next couple of years. So, we'll just see what happens there. But I think that right now, if the draft was, going on, I think that they'd probably say Winston, but Mariota could still be in that mix. And I think that Phillip Rivers is probably at least been talked about.
Well, that's Dan, no one's really talking about that, but that would make sense if you want to get a veteran presence on a team that really, if they poured their draft picks into their defense and maybe one running back, this is a team that could actually be due for a significant rebound in 2015, and plus, it would reunite Phillip Rivers with Vincent Jackson.
Yeah, absolutely, and they got a pretty good one named Mike Evans on the other side. So
yeah,
I mean, there's some things, but hey, and then Tennessee's thinking the same thing, but they don't have two receivers like that. So it'd be real interesting. I think this whole draft will be, because I tell you what, Jim, the thing about this draft too, from maybe 12 to 50 or 12 to 60 in these picks, you got a lot of similarities in guys that obviously are at different positions, but their value is similar. So, I think that if you've got a lot of picks in that group, you're going to get some really good football players, and so after that, that jockeying around and what people are going to do. It's going to be real interesting to see how these guys come off the board. And because I was talking to a team guy the other day, and he got the guide and everything, and he called me and he says, "Well, you got a couple of those guys too low." He said, "They're going to go higher than that." And I said, "Well, hey, only 32 can go in the first round, and so that's why everybody." And I think we've mentioned this before, Jim, that there's 32 teams out there that have either a top 125 or a top 150 board that their draft's going to come off of, and everybody's board's different. So, hey, it's good. That's why it's going to be fun to see starting in Chicago next Thursday what's going to happen.
And Dan, there's already been sort of a discussion of the disparity between how people view these different players, relatively speaking, as well as within all the position groups, and how there is some great difference of opinion in many of these cases between these players. But look, we're not here to start rumors tonight that the Buccaneers are seriously looking at Phillip Rivers. What I understand you're saying is that it is a possibility, and certainly it would make sense, and I agree with you. But let's just think to ourselves, Jameis Winston is selected by the Buccaneers at number one. There'd be no shame in that. I think he's sort of everybody sort of has to agree that that's the way it looks like the Buccaneers are going to be going, and that it's a good pick. But getting closer to the draft, when we start looking at that second pick, and especially Marcus Mariota, we're starting to see stories just all over the place. We have the Titans at number 2 who could just select them outright. They've got Zach Mettenberger. There's already been indication, as there I suppose would be, no matter what, that they're willing to put their hat in the ring with them. But then you've got the stories about the Chargers possibly trading up, getting rid of Phillip Rivers, getting some draft picks together and selecting Mariota. This week there was the Browns having also been connected to trading up for Mariota by trading draft picks outright. Between these two options, the Titans picking Mariota outright or the Chargers-Browns trading up, which do you think has a better chance of happening, or maybe neither one happens?
Yeah, I think that the thing that looks to me the best that could happen is the Chargers making the trade for that second pick, as long as Mariota is there. Now, what if Mariota happens to go first to the Bucs? All deals may be off. So you can't make the deal.
Right.
until your guy is still there and the clock starts. So but I think that. It'd take a lot of guts, but hey, everybody talks about this is a business. Well, hey, if it's true that Phillip Rivers isn't going, to Los Angeles, if the Chargers do in fact move there, and he's not going, they're not going to get anything for him. He'll play out his contract, and that's that. And they lose out on a good young quarterback, or potentially a good young quarterback that we think is going to be a good. A future NFL quarterback. And now if they think that, then they've got to make that deal, as painful as it will be. Because if Rivers is, truly not going to be around. I mean, if he says, hey, this is it for me, I mean, you go to Los Angeles and I'm going home, they need to get something out of it, you know what I mean? And, but, we'll see. Maybe Phillip Rivers isn't talking, so but I guess LaDainian Thomas is doing some talking for him. But he's not saying Rivers isn't saying anything. I guess right now, and it does make a lot of sense, really for both teams if they work that out. Because Ken Wisenhunt coached him, but 2-2 in the NFL draft certainly doesn't always equal 4.
So do you think? That's absolutely true. Yeah. Do you think that the Browns would have any chance of moving up?
I think the Browns would be making a major mistake if they did, and I'll tell you why. Because, hey, build up the team around. Give Manziel. You got Josh McCown to put the fires out, or he'll start, and let's see what Manziel can do this year. And if he can't, I mean, if they got a new coordinator in, now they're putting in another. I mean, this is a thing so dysfunctional. I mean, here we go again, a new coordinator. There's no carryover from last year. Everything's new again. But build up the rest of your team. Hey, you need a big-time receiver. You're probably going to get one. It might be Devontae Parker. Strange things have happened. Maybe one of those two big-timers they're at the top may fall there. You get your defensive line, help your defense. And also, Jim, one thing about Cleveland, they got 3 guys that their contracts are up next year in the offensive line, and they got to do something there, including Joe Thomas. So they can take their picks. They got 10 picks that they can build up their team with, and then if the quarterback situation doesn't work out this year for one reason or another, if there's no glimmer of hope, with Manziel, then next year go ahead and get your quarterback. But and then if you want to take one this year, say Sean Mannion in the 4th or 5th round or 4th round, it'd probably be, I would think, in the 4th, but you never know. But hey, take one there, or if you want to. But go ahead and get these other positions squared away, and then see what you got. But I would not I wouldn't mess around and move up, for Mariota.
Dan, those are absolute words of wisdom for a Browns fan base that has just been aching for some sort of a winning team on the field. And before we sort of move on from the quarterbacks, I wanted to ask you, out of the teams that we've discussed for Mariota that seem to be plausible, whether it be the Titans or the Chargers, which team do you think is a better fit for him, whether it's the scheme or the coaching staff?
Well, I tell you those are 2 very, very big points. I think that McCoy is a very good coach that he would, I think, spend the time of maybe developing a little more, whereas Wisenhunt, he tried to do that out in Arizona, and then Kurt Warner was the backup guy, and he said, hey, I'm tired of seeing Leinart do this crap, so let's get the veteran in here, and we saw what happened. So I think that Wisenhunt would rather have the veteran quarterback in there if at all possible, but he's a very good coach, and maybe he could get some assurances that, hey, I can develop this guy and have him for me. I don't want to develop him for somebody else because I might not be around here. So I think that if the coach and the coordinators, if they're smart about it, that's the thing. I mean, I just see so many good young quarterbacks get, put into a situation where they have no chance to succeed, and then they're the ones that get crucified, and say, well, this guy can't play. He can't play after, 2 or 3 games. Well, I want to tell you something. If the thoughts were the same way in like 1997 or 98, Peyton Manning wouldn't be around now either.
That's some great words of advice. Dan, it's definitely interesting when you start boiling it down that it's not just about the players, but it's about the teams and it's about the coaches. And I know you've told me before that you really need for a player, especially a quarterback, to succeed, to have a coaching staff that believes in him, is willing to invest their time in him in order to make him succeed. As we move on from talking about the quarterbacks, I wanted to ask you a question I asked you the last time you were on the air. Who's your top non-quarterback in this draft? Who's the first non-quarterback selected in this draft? Or maybe that's the other way to put it.
Well, the guy that should be, now whether he is or not is a whole different story, but I think Leonard Williams, because of his versatility, now he's not Ndamukong Suh. I don't want anybody to get that. He's kind of between Suh and McCoy, the defense tackle came out of Oklahoma. It's down at Tampa Bay now. And he's not as dominant a guy as Suh is, but I tell you, he's got a lot of talent, and he can play, that three technique on the inside, which, a lot of times you want a little more angular guy inside because of all these quick passes and things like that. He's going to be able to bat down a lot of passes from the inside, but he can also play on the outside. He can play on the edge. And it'd be really interesting if Jacksonville does take him at 3. I mean, this guy's got some ability to rush from. I'm not going to say this guy's Reggie White, okay, but he's got the ability to rush from the outside along with playing the run. And I'd love to see him in a 4-man scheme where they can move him around, a 4-man front, and move him around, and move him into the 3 technique, move him outside, make him a right defensive end. And I think you would fit fine in that. I know everybody's talking about Fowler and all that stuff, but, you're talking about a guy that's 30 pounds heavier, that's taller, and just as athletic, if not more athletic than Fowler. So, why would you take, the smaller guy? Hey, I learned a long time ago that the good old big ones are better than good old little ones,
Yeah, that would be an outstanding pick for the Jaguars. You could really see him make a difference on that team, almost immediately.
Yep.
I wanted to, your draft guide, to all listeners out there, the ourlads.com draft guide is the best, or one of the best, if not the best, in the business. And going through it, Dan, I saw that you've got Melvin Gordon ranked slightly ahead of Todd Gurley, and I can't tell you how many people I've heard say, Todd Gurley's the one to go, number one out of the running backs. My question to you is, Gurley's knee the difference in your ranking, or is it something else?
No, well, the scheme, I'll tell you. Say for instance, if it's San Diego, for instance, they run the zone scheme, or of course, Dallas Cowboys, they run the zone scheme. So I think his scheme, where whoever decides to pick, because like Gurley, he's more of a downhill power type guy that would fit better with a vertical blocking scheme or a man blocking scheme as opposed to a zone. Not that he couldn't do it, but Gordon's just got a natural, a great vision where he can see those cutback lanes. He can run the inside zone. He's very good in the zone stretch play. And the thing that people make a big mistake on these running backs, and this happened to Richardson. He was a stocky, thicker guy. The thing you got to be able to do is a back has got to squirt through that hole and get to the second level. He's got to get to and through that hole, and a guy like Gurley is not as quick through the hole. They've had some gaping holes at Georgia, and I'll challenge this. Look what Nick Chubb did down there after Gurley left. I'm not saying Gurley's not a great back or anything, but look at, they didn't miss Gurley. They just didn't.
Yeah.
Chubb just chewed up and he was a freshman. Okay, so you just they're going to be talking about Chubb now, just like Gurley here in a year or two. So it's just, if they're not already, and so but anyway, Gurley's he's a first round back. Love him to death. You could flip a coin. I studied, Gordon a lot. We see him in the Big Ten here a whole lot. Gurley, he missed half the year. He was in, and plus he's had other injuries. He's upright running style. This guy gets hurt, and he's been nicked up a lot before that ACL. And a lot of times those big backs like that, he, like I say, he doesn't get through that. He didn't squirt through that hole as quickly as a Gordon does. And even though he can drag some people with him, but like we mentioned in our guide, Gordon drug Giovanni and Clowney on his back in the bowl game they played 2 years ago, 5 yards for a first down. You know what I mean? So he's got the power to him too. So it's just a matter. But I think that the zone blocking scheme, Gordon is the guy that you want, and then if you want a downhill man vertical blocking scheme, then Gurley's your guy.
Okay, so you see both these guys getting drafted in the first round, I take it.
I do. I really do. And if Gordon doesn't, that's going to be a steal for somebody. But I think both those guys should go in the first round.
Okay. And what teams do you think just can't pass these guys up if they're available to them?
Well, I don't know if they're, because it depends what their board says and if they stick to their board and what have you. But I think.
But Dan, if you're the GM or if you're a scout to the GM and he says, Dan, which team could you see you looking at them going, you got to take this guy?
Well, San Diego, if they don't do the deal for the quarterback, I think they definitely got to take. To me, they would take Gordon, but because they are his own blocking scheme up front, I think that. Certainly then, you got a little bit of a, Cincinnati doesn't need a back. Early, hey, at 6, people think, well, the Jets, everybody thinks the Jets do everything.
Everybody's talking about Dallas being in the mix, but to me, it doesn't even seem like either one of them lasts to Dallas.
Well, they shouldn't, but, McFadden with his injury situation, But McFadden, he'll be best in a zone scheme like that too. But you know what? They're zone stretch in Dallas. But yeah, they may not. Baltimore, okay? Baltimore's a team that would certainly entertain a guy like Gordon or the power guy like Gurley. They're a zone blocking scheme up front. Carolina is a zone blocking scheme. Detroit, although I like some of their backs up there, they're zone stretch. They're a zone stretch scheme, which would be perfect. I don't think Philadelphia needs any more running backs.
What about the Falcons? Do you think they could go for a running back that first round, or they have too many other needs, like on defense?
They've got to have a pass rusher, Jim. They just got to have a pass rusher. I think they had like 13 sacks or something like that. It was pathetic. They've got to have a pass rusher. So, I think that, but hey, if something happens, say for instance, Minnesota, that, Peterson's out of there, although they do like, the Kennan kid from last year, in there, they like him, the little running back, but,
Ellington,
I think they'd go corner. They'd go defense there. I think they're going to go corner. So, I just, hey, Cleveland, they got those backs that rotated that were really pretty good last year.
Right.
So, no, I think that, you're talking about, going down there to San Diego might be the first stopping point at 17 if there's not a trade,
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about Melvin Gordon and Todd Gurley so much so in the past week or two that a lot of these other running backs are sort of being overlooked. Who's your third running back, and is it possible that he goes in round 1?
I don't think so. Tevin Coleman from Indiana is our third guy. But then you've got from second, third, and fourth round, you got some good backs in there. And
you do.
So, Coleman's there. Ajayi from Boise State. Abdullah is he's more of a special type guy. But here's the thing that it drives me nuts when I'm listening to all these people that talk about these guys going certain rounds. I would challenge everybody to go to ourlads.com, click on our position depth charts, okay? Go look at those running backs. There's only 3 running backs that are under 200 pounds or around 200 pounds. Everybody's over, 220. So, guys like Coleman are really undersized, but, they're going to be taken. But Abdullah, he's around 205. And then you go down to Duke Johnson. He's around 205. And then, but so you look at Artis Payne, he's around 205. We got him in the late 4th round. But now you look at the other guys, Ajayi's over 220. Yeah, he's going to be viable for somebody. David Johnson, Northern Iowa, viable, good hands. Yeldon, slasher, over 220. Allen from SC, over 220. Langford, he was the fastest guy. Now, if you could win money, go down to some Chicago bar and ask who the fastest guy at the combine was this year at running back. It was Langford from Michigan State. He ran the fastest 40 time, and then you got another big guy, Carlos Williams from Florida State. Davis is around 220 from, South Carolina. So those guys are all viable NFL running backs that may be ahead of those 200-pound guys. I mean, you look at, like I said, you look at the 32 teams as the starting running back, and you only got a couple of those 200-pound backs. Everybody else is over 220.
That's pretty incredible. But, I also think that given the weight and even some of the height considerations, you have to look at them in terms of their health. It's a little bit better to be a little bit bigger, compared to the smaller guys. I mean, Andre Ellington last year, pretty much proved that he just couldn't take the beating.
Right, and he's a heck of a back. He's an explosive guy. And but no, you're exactly right. That's those guys get beat up, and you got one of the guys a little more compact that's got some explosiveness and things like that can. But then again, hey, if you already got a back that you feel good about that's a little bit bigger, bring in a Coleman, bring in an Abdullah, because they can do different things and be your specialty guy. And guys, and Duke Johnson. But if you're expecting to get those guys to stay healthy, then and they haven't been. Those guys haven't been. Abdullah has of the 3 that I'm mentioning, but for the most part, he was nicked up too. But those guys, simple physics. You're just not big enough to handle. But if you bring them in for 12 to 15 carries a game at doing different things, they'll be good at that.
You mentioned is it Ajayi?
Yeah, Ajayi, yes.
Ajayi. And there was a recent report by Dane Brugler of CBS Sports, who we've actually had on the show before, that there was a strong concern about the longevity of his knee, its stability. And I think what's sort of coming out of all this is, while there were sources that indicated these concerns, it sounds like it's teams sort of floating some disinformation out there, saying, oh, we don't like this guy, just to try to force other teams who might be interested in him to pass on him so they could draft him themselves. And I guess my question to you is an outsider looking in, it's real easy to say, wow, people in the NFL really do this?
Oh, they do weird stuff. Because I remember before, when I was interviewing different players at, I think one year was at the Senior Bowl, another year was at the East West, and guys are saying, and then another one time was at the Combine. There was people saying Ricky Williams, because I had to get Ricky Williams, because that was a big year for us. We ended up taking Donovan McNabb, but all these people are saying, oh, Ricky Williams is a jerk. He didn't show up for the meetings and stuff like that. And I can't tell you. Hey, Ricky Williams, I went, and I saw Ricky at the Combine. I said, hey, we'd like to meet with you. Coach Reed wants to meet with you and this and that at 7:30. And he says, okay, I'll be there. I says, do I need to meet you anywhere to, get you over to our suites? No, I'll just meet you in the lobby. And he was there at 7:30, and I right on time. You know what I mean? So that was just one case, but I had, other ones are saying, oh, this guy, Antonio Freeman, the wide receiver, plays for Green Bay for years. He was another one. So, oh, this jerk, he wouldn't do what he's told to do. Stuff. Hey, I got all, he did everything exactly right. So, yeah, that stuff does happen.
And it's amazing, too, because the story it got so much legs that caused various responses and inquiries, and even a Jay's agent chimed in to say, hey, he wasn't supposed to be at the scouting combine medical recheck. So, it was just truly one of these things that just kind of makes you shake your head and go, oh, boy. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on. Wide receivers. I know you've got 4 of them in round 1, or at least with round 1 grades, and they all certainly could go in round 1. And I apologize, I don't have my list in front of me of who they are, but I got to think Amari Cooper's in there, Jalen Strong.
Kevin White.
That's right.
Kevin White and Devontae Parker. Yeah.
Devontae Parker, thank you. Oklahoma's Dorial Green Beckham, he's created quite the buzz among draft prognosticators, but he's got some off-the-field issues, which, for me, when I hear the buzz that's being created, I go, but what about all these things in the background that no one's really talking about? These things affect people's draft stock and even kind of make you go, I would think as a scout. Can you talk a little bit about those specifically as to Green Beckham, and do you think there's a chance he goes in round 1?
No, I mean, I wouldn't touch the guy. If he does, the general manager will probably be fired, before their contract's up, because I would not touch this guy. I mean, he's one of those type that we always call the FUBAR board, and I won't go into exactly what that means, but it's let's put it this way: it's a sideboard, and you put the guys over there that you would not draft, or you would not take them until a special time. Like, say, for instance, he'd last to the 6th round, which you wouldn't do, but if he, you'd take him there because, hey, if the guy screws up, but see, to me, I wouldn't even take him then, because you don't need that aggravation and distraction, for your ball club. I mean, you're representing your city and everything else, and I'm always opposed to guys like that. I mean, if they've got a pattern of stupidity, this guy's got some domestic violence. I mean, his marijuana thing. I mean, he's got some stuff in there. You know what I mean? So, but there'll be teams that take him. You know what I mean? There's going to be somebody that's going to take him. But I would not touch the guy myself at any round.
So Dan, if you're a scout and you're being talked to by the general manager about him, you express all these things. I would assume, even as a scout, you would want some sort of reassurance. Hey, if you take him, don't blame me if things go wrong. And then I would think that the general manager might even go to ownership and say, hey, we've got this one player. Here's what we're thinking about him. We would take him at such and such a point. Are you guys okay with that, or would you rather we just avoid him altogether? Would that be sort of how it would play out?
Well, I think that what it does is the general manager will visit with the owner, and they go over all that stuff, or they have done said, hey, this is what the guy is. Here's his file. I personally, like, if I'm the general manager, I'd say, well, hey, I wouldn't take this guy, but you're the owner, and this is what the guy can do. If you want to say, I'll watch film with him, the guy's very talented. He can do this and that, but he might be on the front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer tomorrow because of something stupid he's going to do. Now, do you want him or not? You know what I mean? Because to me, I don't want the guy. But, you're the owner. It's your call. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they'll say, well, hey, I hired you to make those decisions, so he's stick him over on the FUBAR board, And
you don't want the next Justin Blackman or Josh Gordon at this point, because it's just too much of an investment, not just financially, but personnel-wise. I mean, people invest their time in the guy, and he just sucks out all the energy out of not just your coaches, but the rest of the team.
Right, and it's a distraction that you don't need. Here's somebody that all of a sudden you're counting on to do something, and then he does something stupid, or he doesn't show up, or So anyway, it's just the guys like that aren't worth having around, and there's exceptions to every rule, but there's certain things like drugs and domestic violence and all that stuff that you can do without. Maybe if a guy, say for instance, he tested one time for marijuana. Okay, hey,
right.
That because I tell you what, I know plenty of guys in the league that tested for marijuana or something like that. And, they never tested again in the league. Now, I don't know, maybe they hit it or, they masked it or something, but,
sure.
they were never a problem. A one-time thing, but if a guy that's got a pattern of stuff, that's a whole different story.
Dan, I want to move on to tight end and talk to you about Max Williams, who I know is your top tight end. We talked about him in the last show. The guy is just a human highlight reel, at least as far as his 2014 season is concerned. You've got him going in round 1 to the Saints, which is just an absolute perfect pick. That's a team that, with their second pick in that first round, can get a tight end, replace the long gone Jimmy Graham, and just move on from sort of the cleaning house that they've done, and get Saints fans to think about somebody new. So my question is, if it wasn't for the Saints taking him late in the first round, do you think he'd be a first-round draft pick, or would he likely have fallen to the second?
Well, I'll tell you what. Here's the other thing. Green Bay has got to be eyeing him too. He might not make it to the Saints. Green Bay doesn't have a tight end like this guy. They got Corliss, and they got and they carry like 6 tight ends too. So, if you got him, I would be scared, very scared, if I was the NFC North and they got Max Williams, because I don't think we've seen even just the littlest of what Max Williams can do. This guy, I think, is going to be a great tight end. And I know he only ran 4.81 or whatever, but the guy runs good routes. And I think everything's ahead of him. He's just going to get bigger, faster, stronger. His dad played in the league for 10 or 12 years for the Giants. And, he got great bloodlines on both sides. His mom was a great athlete. So I think this guy here is, but that being said, now Cleveland needs a tight end, like this too. But they won't take him at 19. Because they got to have the defensive. They need a defensive tackle, they need a big time wide receiver. But hey, if they took Devontae Parker and they took him, and then going down the second round, go ahead and get a defensive tackle to help them, a nose tackle or something like that. They'd be cooking with gas.
Yeah. Today it was announced that defensive end Greg Hardy was being suspended for 10 games. Do you think that the Cowboys now are under pressure to take a defensive end in that first round?
No, I don't think they have to take one in the first round because those guys at the top should all be gone. Now, I wouldn't. I do. Yeah. At one time, I think Jerry Jones would take Gregory if he fell down there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's not a 4-3 end. He's what he is. He's a 3-4 outside, pass rusher is what he is. And so he's not a Tampa 2 guy, and he's, it's not a great fit. But no, I don't think they'd have the pressure to take somebody, down there. I think that they seem like they're on the right path of doing stuff the correct way. So no. So to answer your question, I think they knew that was coming, is what Jerry Jones said. So they're either going to go, they may go corner, they may go running back. They may, if Gordon's there or Gurley's there, they may go ahead with the running back,
Are there any players out there that you're getting a sense of as we get closer to the draft that they're at risk of either falling out of the first round or just nosediving in terms of their value, and rather than being a first or second round, maybe even third round pick, they're possibly going to be a player that might just fall towards the end of the draft?
Well, I don't know if they'll fall that far, but, I think Gregory could be that guy, although, Arthur Blanks comes out at Atlanta and said, well, we might not have to watch that character like we used to or something like that, so maybe he'll go at 8. I don't know. But, but I could see him, flying down the elevator shaft,
that elevator shaft is a long and deep place, Dan.
Yeah, I know it. And I'll tell you what, when you hit it, boy, it's not pretty. It's the black hole, So, but the guys that fall, and last year Antonio Richardson, we had him in the first round, really liked him, but he had 2 bad knees, and in fact he's had microfracture surgery here in the offseason for the Vikings. They signed him as a free agent, but we weren't privileged to a lot of the medical. They keep that stuff pretty tight, So If there might be some medical guys, in the first round that we don't know about, that which would cause them to fall, or maybe some hidden character thing. Although generally that's would come out, but I think right now. You might, we've got now Jake Fisher. We've got in the first round. We love Jake Fisher. Now, other people may not like him up there. Although I have talked to some offensive line coaches in the league, they all like him. But they're not maybe making the pick, though the general manager is. You know what I mean? So, but I've liked Jake Fisher for a long time. He was our top athlete, athletically, the top tackle at the combine this year, and we think that he's going to be an excellent player for somebody. So, but, I don't, and then maybe Marcus Peters, depends what people think about that deal, on his thing. He might fall out of there. Gregory would be the one that I think is, would really slide if anybody does.
Okay. Dan, this is a fill-in-the-blank question. All right, so here it is, or a statement. Just fill in the blank. Don't be surprised if blank goes in the first round.
Eric Rowe.
Tell us about Eric.
I'll tell you what, Jim, we evaluated him as a corner, in which he's a safety with corner skills, but he was a heck of a safety for 3 years at Utah. And he's a guy that might slip into the bottom of the first round because there's not a lot of safeties out there, and here's a safety with corner skills, and so I think that he's a guy that could possibly. I mean, I've looked at tape on him, as much tape as even the last few weeks, and like I said, we got him in the fourth round as a corner. And it's my fault that I haven't, because at worst I probably should have had him in the third. But he's a guy that it would not surprise me if he ends up going in the first round, because there's a need for him. There's not many safeties, and he was our top athletic defensive back at the combine too. So this guy's not a stiff. He can turn and run. He can he can jump. He can do all that stuff. So, and keep in mind that Byron Scott, was there too. Byron Jones, I'm sorry, from Connecticut, and he had the lights out, long jump and vertical and all that stuff. Well, this guy, Rowe even had a higher. He graded out higher overall in every athletic event than Byron Jones did. So, Eric Rowe, he's a big guy too. So he may be a guy that gets in that first round.
Dan, before we get to our break and let you go so you can get to bed, what other observations do you want to share with the people at home who are going to be watching the draft? What kinds of things do you think lay people who aren't really involved just need to know about the onslaught of picks and action and things we're going to see starting Thursday night?
Well, I think that big thing is to sit back and kind of enjoy what's going, the process that's going on, because I think for the most part you'll see guys get taken in these spots. Cooper and the Whites, they'll be the early maybe let's just say they're top 12 or so, because I think that one of those guys could slide, But sometimes you notice that people that you think know what they're talking about don't know what you'll find out they don't know what they're talking about. I'll never forget about the Sharif Floyd, how they just beat that to death on the national media, and I kept saying, well, gee whiz, the best guy out there, Sheldon Richardson. You know what I mean? I said, what are you guys looking at? In fact, I even texted and called and tweeted some guys, say, you guys are making a mistake. And I said, this guy's and anyway, long story short, Sheldon was the NFL defensive rookie of the year. So, but anyway, if you study the film, you really study the film, you'll see things fall into place. And but I think you'll be surprised. The fans will be surprised out there about where some of the guys go. You'll see good football players on, but because like I said, now between 10 and 50, there's going to really good football players that are taking that all the way through there. Okay?
Dan, I want to thank you again for coming on the show and talking NFL draft prospects and NFL draft with us. For our listeners, that's Dan Shonka. You can follow Dan on Twitter at rlads_Shonka. That's SHONKA, rlads_Shonka. Or go to rlads.com. They help you think and talk like an expert of the NFL draft and free agency. Subscribe to their draft guide and newsletters, which I promise you won't be disappointed by. Thanks again, Dan. Let's take a break.
Take another second to keep breathing in the moment before it's gone. You never know when love is lost until you find just what it costs to be wrong. I wonder if you think of me passing by, you think you see me coming. I wonder if you pull me in, kiss me just one time again. In the final hours of night, do you remember? Lost or found, love lying by your side. In the final hours of night, do you remember? Lost or found, love lying by your side. Days will keep on coming and the nights will keep on going till they're tired. Falling fast asleep and as they dream of ghosts of beats filled with desire. The chance of life is all around, a chance to take is always found. Oh, writing on the lullabies, I'm alone and live your life. Oh, do you remember? Lost or found, love lying by your side. In the final hours of night, do you remember? Lost or found, love lying by your side. Take another second to keep breathing in the moment before it's gone. You never know when love is lost until you find just what it costs to be wrong. I wonder if you think of me passing by, you think you see me coming. I wonder if you pull me in, kiss me just one time again. The final hours of night, do you remember? Lost or found, love lying by your side. In the final hours of night, do you remember? Lost or found, love lying by your side. In the final hours of night, do you remember? Hours of night, do you remember? Lost or found, love lying by your side. In the final hours of night, do you remember? Lost or found, love lying by your side.
Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
So wide you can't get around it.
So low you can get under it.
So high you can't get over it.
Welcome back to the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour. We're bringing it down with with the jams and beats of Mr. Keith Grieve of 87 Sports Fans. This is Jim Sarantias of thefantasygreek.com, and we're in the second half of our show. Keith, what'd you think of the first half?
It was fantastic. There's just so much information. You can't process it all.
You know, and that's what I love about Dan, even though many times it pretty much is you ask the question, you just sit back and let the man speak. And I was tempted, as we were talking during the break, to just let him go till the end of the show, but I couldn't do it to the man. He's been on the radio all day. It's time for him to go to bed. And soon us as well. But
yes,
we've got stuff to talk about. I mean, we've got some news, but even before we get to that, we've got the draft coming up. And why don't you get it started and sort of mention to the folks out there pretty much generally what we have planned for the week.
Monday night, at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 87 Sports Fans Live will take a backseat, and we'll do our official 87sportsfans.com NFL mock first round. We'll have a bunch of different people repping the teams in the first round, and we will do our best to replicate what will actually happen on Thursday night. Last year was a lot of fun. I think for some, I know for a fact, it was Claire's first time hanging out with us, and she was just mentally spent by the end of it. It was a good, and again, a good way. It was challenging. That's how I mean that.
And Claire, for the listeners out there, mention who Claire is.
Claire Mullins from NFLFemale.com. She did a show on this station for a little while with Andy Carlson, Claire versus Carlson. She is confirmed she will be joining us again as a special guest.
Oh, that's great. And plus, we've got some of the writers from thefantasygreek.com who cover some of the different teams that'll be joining us as well. Who else? Is Johnny going to join us? Steve?
Steve will be there. Jim Wiedner is going to get back to me, but he's 90% sure he'll be there. Covers the Packers and the Vikings for your site.
Nice.
It should be a good time.
That's great. And plus, on thefantasygreek.com, we've got all types of stuff we're going to be rolling out. We're coming out with some articles beginning tomorrow, which are sort of 7 questions I pose to the various writers and sort of collective responses. So question number 1, let's say, who's the number one overall draft pick? Everybody gets to chime in on what they think. And believe it or not, it's always surprising to me when I think is the simplest question. I end up getting so many diverse answers that you end up finding out that it's not, as clear as everybody might see. And then the big event next week will be the draft itself on Thursday night, and we'll be podcasting live from the Cubby Bear, which is right across Wrigley Field, historic Wrigley Field in Chicago. Cubby Bear being one of the USA Today's top 10 sports bars, and we're putting together a live podcast with a fundraiser to benefit WITS Chicago, which stands for Working in the Schools. They're an organization that helps kids with their reading. They're fighting literacy in the schools, and they do it through volunteers and by supplying kids books for the summer to read. If you're interested, come on out and join us. It's always a bunch of fun, good time to talk a little bit of smack with the people around you. Bring your friends, hang with them, make some new friends. The cost of the event's $50, but it includes food and a donation to WITS, as well as an entry into a live raffle of various items. We've got some autographed sports stuff, and we've got some gift certificates. I can tell you we've got some Cubs tickets for anybody that likes the Cubs, which these days that's like the thing to do for once. So you got to come out and just have a good time with us. And if you're interested and need tickets, go to thefantasygreek.com. You'll see a link right there on our homepage, or go to Eventbrite. That's EVENTBRITE.com. Type WITS, WITS, and it'll take you right to the homepage for the event.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, we got through all that. How much time we got left?
About 6 minutes.
Wow. So that's not too much time at all. But, I suppose we could cover a couple of the news stories that hit us today. And the first one was Dave Hardy, 10-game suspension. I had hoped to get Ben Franklin on the air, but he's running late from work. But Keith, what's sort of your reaction to all this?
Well, it kind of serves the Cowboys right for taking such a risk with a guy that was, magically the woman he's accused of beating seemed to lose interest in pressing the case, and by all reports, allegedly, of course, she got some big fat deposits made in her bank account. So it all points to something that not something that points to a person of the highest character. So the Cowboys wanted to take a flyer, so now they lose him for a little bit more than half the season. How that affects their draft prognostic or draft outlook or strategy?
Strategy, yeah.
Yeah. You and I were talking before the break. I agree with you. I think they still go running back with that first pick. But if there's somebody there that they feel can make a difference on the edge rush, I mean, they weren't all that great in that department last year. They lost some on the interior line as well. So I still think that replacing DeMarco Murray will be task one. But if anybody follows my thoughts and listens to me regularly, they know that I've said that you can replace a running back if your line is pretty good. And the Cowboys had one of the better offensive lines last season. So it all depends who's there, but I agree with you. They'll go running back with that first pick.
Yeah, it's not so much about the draft, but in terms of what happened with Greg Hardy. I mean, I saw some Cowboys fans immediately jump up, raise their arms, and pretty much say, serves you right, Jerry Jones. But the reality is that he's got an incentive later contract. I think there's some guaranteed money, maybe $1 million, which that's a lot of money
Right.
for most people. But otherwise, he gets paid per game he plays. So even though I think the Cowboys expected him to only be suspended 6 or 8 games, we've got 10 now. So they're not going to be out of pocket up until he gets back. And then in terms of the draft, just like you said, they could still focus in on that running back or other position of need, or and wait on the defensive end. But I could see him going in with an edge rusher, and I think it does enough for them to say, we don't want to be missing a top edge rusher for 10 games. We want to be in the Super Bowl.
They're not drafting until 27th, so is a difference maker in that position going to be available? I mean, this draft is supposedly somewhat thick with edge rushers, and most of them are projected to go by the mock drafts that I've read in the first half to the first 2/3 of the draft. So I can't even guarantee that anybody's going to be there. I would not out of the ballpark wild card scenario for the Cowboys. Don't be surprised if at 27 that they go with the secondary, because they were really poor in coverage last year.
Yeah, we've been talking about all these rookie running backs and of the like, and there's a great article on our site that we put out there today. It's actually a Cowboys article, which it's entitled "Cowboys Nation Running Back Draft Options." We're going to redo it for the draft because it's basically a nice summary of each of the running backs for the draft. And a running back I want to sort of tout, or somebody I like pretty much basically because of the film I've seen on him during the season, as well as the Senior Bowl especially, is David Johnson out of Northern Iowa. This kid, I think, if the Cowboys don't get a running back at 27, I think he could be available to them at the very end of round 2. And if I were them, I would jump all over him. For me, he reminds me of sort of a Matt Forte, Steven Jackson kind of guy. Runs a little bit silky, but then can run with great power. So that's somebody that I like, and I'd like everybody to just be attentive and aware of him, because he's a player that could surprise.
You said silky.
Silky. It's sort of like Arian Foster. When Arian Foster runs, he doesn't run heavy. He's not like boom, boom, boom. He just moves and he glides down the field. That's how I think David Johnson runs.
With the grace of an elegant lady.
There you go. There you go. But hey, what other news items do we have today?
Well, you know what? I saw. Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead. It's your show.
No. You go ahead.
I just saw an interesting angle that the Browns are the front runners to get Tennessee's number 2 pick.
I think that's just bull. I really loved what Dan said about it, which is, they just really shouldn't do it. I mean, they've got a guy that, coach him up, do the best you can, fill out the rest of the positions on your roster, and then go get your quarterback next year. If they don't, they just have too many other positions of need, especially what he pointed out, which until today I didn't realize, is out of their starting linemen, 3 of them have their contracts up for next year.
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely they'll be able to re-sign all 3. So, anyway, is that it, Keith?
That is it. We're out of time.
That is it. We are out of time. Okay. Well, listen, I want to thank our guest, Dan Shanka from ourlads.com, NFL Scouts. If you're not familiar with them, go to ourlads.com, check them out, check out their draft guide. It's all really good stuff. For Keith Grieve of 87 Sports Fans, this is Jim Sarantias of thefantasygreek.com. You've been listening to the Fantasy Greeks NFL Football Power Hour. You can catch us every Wednesday night from 10 p.m. Eastern to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. To all our listeners, you're the best. Good night, good night, good night.
Turn out the lights, the party's over.